By sunset, on the 25th of June, 1876, over 260 U.S. soldiers lay dead on the Little Bighorn, their blue coats stained with blood, as Sioux warrior Rain in the Face, gripping his stone war axe and rifle, charged through the chaos. Historian D. Brown notes this was no mere skirmish, but a masterful defense by a people fighting for their homeland. For a century, Custer's defeat was called a massacre of brave soldiers by savages. Yet, what hidden strategies and sacrifices of the Sioux turned this battle into America's greatest military humiliation? Watch to uncover their untold story. On the 25th of June, 1876, the Sioux encampment along the Little Bighorn River buzzed with life. Women like Red Horse, wielding digging sticks, gathered turnips in the fields. Men, including Rain in the Face, feasted in a young warrior's lodge, their laughter mingling with the clatter of wooden bowls. Children splashed in the shallow river, their voices carrying across the valley. This sprawling village, stretching over 2.5 miles, and housing thousands from tribes like the Hunkpapa, Oglala, and Cheyenne, thrived in a moment of peace. Crow King, a Hunkpapa leader, later recalled that no one foresaw the violence about to erupt. Historian Nathaniel Philbrick, in his book The Last Stand, estimates the camp held up to 7,000 people, a testament to the Sioux's unity in the face of growing U.S. pressure. This serene morning, however, was a fragile illusion, soon to be shattered by the approach of Custer's 7th Cavalry. Whispers of danger had already begun to circulate in the camp. For days, rumors spread that Long Hair, the infamous George Armstrong Custer, was hunting the Sioux and their allies. Crow King noted these murmurs but dismissed the idea of an immediate attack. The Sioux had clashed with U.S. forces before, notably at the 1868 Battle of Washita, where Custer's troops killed over 100 Cheyenne, including women and children. Yet, on this morning, the vast encampment felt secure, its people absorbed in daily tasks. Historian Robert Utley, in the Indian Wars, argues that the Sioux's confidence stemmed from their recent victories and the sheer size of their coalition. This false sense of safety, however, left them vulnerable to the rapid advance of Custer's 600-man regiment, already marching closer under the Montana sun. As the camp went about its routines, Sioux scouts kept a watchful eye. Since dawn, they had tracked U.S. troops crossing the Wolf Mountains, a rugged divide separating the Rosebud and Little Bighorn valleys. Gall, a Hunkpapa warrior, later testified that these scouts noticed a critical detail. The soldiers split into 2 groups. Major Marcus Reno led 3 companies, about 175 men, while Custer commanded 5 companies, roughly 210 soldiers. This division, as historian James Donovan notes in A Terrible Glory, was a tactical blunder that weakened the 7th Cavalry's cohesion. The scouts' vigilance provided the Sioux with early intelligence, allowing them to prepare for the coming storm. Their reports, carried on swift ponies, would soon prove vital as the dust of approaching hoofbeats grew nearer. The first signs of trouble stirred the camp's tranquility. Flying Hawk, an Oglala warrior, recalled spotting clouds of dust rising in the distance, a telltale mark of cavalry on the move. Then, a tribal chief saw a U.S. flag planted on a nearby hill, its stars and stripes fluttering ominously. These omens disrupted the morning's rhythm. Women paused their work, shielding their eyes to scan the horizon. Men stepped out of lodges, hands tightening around knives or bows. According to historian Gregory Mickno, the Sioux camp's location in a wide, flat valley offered little natural defense, making these early warnings crucial. The flag, likely raised by Custer's scouts, signaled not just presence, but intent, setting the stage for a confrontation that would echo through history. Suddenly, the calm shattered. A Sioux scout, his horse lathered with sweat, galloped into the camp, shouting warnings of white soldiers approaching. Moments later, a second scout arrived, his voice urgent as he confirmed the danger. Crow King described how this scout revealed a critical piece of intelligence. The army had divided into two forces, one circling to strike from a different direction. This news, corroborated by historian Stephen Ambrose in Crazy Horse and Custer, underscored the Sioux's ability to gather real-time battlefield information. The scouts' breathless reports electrified the camp, transforming it from a place of daily life into a hive of preparation. The Sioux now faced a dual threat, and their response would need to be swift and coordinated. With the scouts' warnings ringing in their ears, the Sioux acted decisively. Crow King recounted that the order to evacuate the camp came immediately. The priority was clear: protect the women and children. Lodges were abandoned as families prepared to flee. This rapid mobilization reflected the Sioux's experience in warfare, honed through decades of conflict with rival tribes and U.S. forces. Historian Thomas Powers, in The Killing of Crazy Horse, notes that the Sioux's social structure allowed for quick decision-making in crises, with chiefs like Sitting Bull and Crow King issuing commands respected by all. The evacuation order marked the first step in a defensive strategy that would soon turn the tables on their attackers. The storm broke as Major Reno's troops launched their assault, targeting the Hunkpapa lodges, which sat highest along the riverbank. Reno's 175 men charged with sabers drawn and carbines ready. Red Horse, who had been digging turnips, later described the chaos as bullets tore through teepee hides, shattering the morning's peace. The Hunkpapa, numbering about 1,500 people according to Philbrick, were the largest band in the camp, making their section a prime target. Reno's attack, intended to scatter the Sioux, instead ignited a fierce resistance. The choice to strike the Hunkpapa first, as Donovan argues, was a miscalculation, underestimating the warriors' readiness to defend their families. From a distance of 400 yards, Reno's soldiers formed a skirmish line, their Springfield carbines unleashing a hail of bullets. Flying Hawk and Crow King recounted the horror as shots struck women and children, some falling amid screams. This indiscriminate fire, documented by Utley, killed at least a dozen non-combatants, fueling the Sioux's resolve. The soldiers' blue coats and kepi hats stood out starkly against the green valley, their disciplined ranks a stark contrast to the camp's chaos. Yet, this show of force only hardened the Sioux's determination, as the attack on their kin transformed fear into fury. The Sioux's response was immediate and chaotic, yet purposeful. Women, clutching infants or dragging older children, fled in all directions. Red Horse and Iron Hawk described how many sought refuge in a coulee, a shallow ravine along the Little Bighorn, its steep banks offering meager protection. Others ran downstream toward the Cheyenne camp, their footsteps kicking up dust. Michno estimates that over 4,000 non-combatants were in the camp, their mass exodus a logistical challenge. The sight of mothers shielding children, some wounded, underscored the human cost of Reno's assault, galvanizing the warriors to protect their people at all costs. As women and children fled, Sioux men sprang into action. Iron Hawk, still groggy from oversleeping, grabbed a rope and managed to lasso one horse as others bolted in panic. His brother, more prepared, rounded up additional mounts. This scramble for horses was critical, as the Sioux relied on their cavalry to counter Reno's charge. Powers notes that the Sioux's equestrian skill, honed over generations on the Great Plains, gave them a mobility advantage. Despite the chaos, with horses rearing and dust choking the air, the warriors' efforts to arm themselves showed a community rallying under pressure, their resolve forged in the face of an unprovoked attack. The Sioux camp, now a whirlwind of dust and desperation, saw its women and children rise to the occasion. Gull, a Hunkpapa warrior whose family would soon face tragedy, later praised their courage as they chased down fleeing horses. With deft hands, mothers and young boys roped mounts for the warriors, ensuring the Sioux could meet Reno's charge with a mounted force. Historian Nathaniel Philbrick, in The Last Stand, estimates that the camp's 2,000 horses were critical to its defense, outnumbering the 7th Cavalry's 600 mounts. This collective effort, with women shouting encouragement and children dodging hooves, showcased a community united under fire. Their actions transformed chaos into strength, giving warriors the mobility needed to turn the tide. Amid the clamor, Rain in the Face sprinted to his teepee, his moccasins pounding the earth. He emerged, clutching a Springfield rifle, a quiver of arrows, a sturdy bow, and his prized stone war axe, its handle worn from years of use. This arsenal, blending traditional and modern weapons, reflected the Sioux's adaptability. Historian Robert Utley, in The Indian Wars, notes that warriors like Rain in the Face often carried both firearms captured from U.S. forces and ancestral tools, making them versatile in battle. As he checked his rifle's breech, Rain in the Face prepared to face Reno's men, his resolve hardened by the screams of fleeing kin. His swift arming signaled the Sioux's readiness to defend their homeland. As Reno's bullets tore through the Hunkpapa lodges, Rain in the Face glanced across the Little Bighorn and froze. On a cliff opposite the camp, a new line of blue-coated soldiers appeared, their carbines glinting in the sun. This was Custer's force, roughly 210 men, moving to outflank the village. Historian James Donovan, in A Terrible Glory, argues that Custer's decision to split from Reno aimed to trap the Sioux in a pincer movement, a tactic that underestimated their numbers. Rain in the Face's shout alerted nearby warriors, who redirected their ponies downstream toward the ford. This pivotal moment, shifting focus from one threat to another, revealed the Sioux's ability to adapt under pressure. The response was immediate. Young warriors from the Oglala, Minneconjou, Cheyenne, and Hunkpapa bands, some barely in their teens, grabbed weapons and mounted horses. Red Horse, who had abandoned his turnip digging to join the fight, noted there was no time for a war council. The attack's speed forced action over deliberation. According to historian Gregory Mickno, the Sioux fielded up to 1,500 warriors, outnumbering the 7th Cavalry's 600 men nearly 3-1. These young fighters, their faces painted with ochre and black, charged toward the new threat, their war cries echoing across the valley. Their haste, born of necessity, set the stage for a coordinated defense. Leading this surge were Kicking Bear and Crazy Horse, their names synonymous with courage. Flying Hawk and Oglala described how Kicking Bear, astride a swift pony, rallied warriors with a raised lance, while Crazy Horse, his hair adorned with hawk feathers, urged them forward. Historian Thomas Powers, in The Killing of Crazy Horse, calls Crazy Horse a tactical genius whose leadership inspired unwavering loyalty. Their charge against Reno's men, now dismounting to form a skirmish line, electrified the Sioux. This bold counterattack, launched from the heart of a beleaguered camp, transformed victims into aggressors, catching Reno's troops off guard. The Hunkpapa warriors, including Iron Hawk, found cover in the thickets and cottonwood groves near Reno's position. Crouching among the willows, they watched as Reno's men, roughly 175 strong, dismounted to fire volleys. Iron Hawk, clutching a bow, noted how the soldiers' horses were tethered in a vulnerable line. Historian Stephen Ambrose, in Crazy Horse and Custer, highlights the Sioux's use of terrain, with riverbank foliage providing concealment for ambushes. From these hidden positions, the Hunkpapa prepared to strike, their arrows and bullets aimed at disrupting Reno's formation. This strategic use of cover marked the beginning of a devastating counteroffensive. The Sioux struck with ferocity. Red Horse recounted how, in a single, thunderous charge, warriors surged forward, their ponies' hooves shaking the earth. They drove Reno's men across the Little Bighorn, where the river's swift current, swollen by spring rains, became a death trap. Dozens of soldiers, weighed down by boots and cartridge belts, drowned as they fled. Philbrick estimates that Reno lost at least 40 men in this retreat, nearly a quarter of his force. The Sioux's relentless pursuit, with warriors firing from horseback, shattered Reno's cohesion. This victory, though costly, proved the Sioux's ability to exploit their enemies' missteps. The battlefield descended into chaos, yet the Sioux maintained a grim discipline. Gall described how the fight split, with Sioux warriors pressing Reno while Cheyenne fighters turned to face Custer's distant force. Despite the confusion, their tactics held firm. Donovan notes that the Sioux's decentralized leadership, relying on chiefs like Gall and Crazy Horse, allowed for flexible responses. Warriors moved in waves, some circling to harass Reno's flanks, others galloping toward Custer. This ability to fight on two fronts, while protecting their fleeing families, underscored a sophistication often overlooked by contemporary accounts. In the midst of battle, the Sioux secured a logistical edge. Iron Hawk, now mounted, helped round up panicked horses that had scattered during Reno's initial charge. These mounts, vital for mobility, were herded back to the warriors by women and boys. Michno estimates that the Sioux's 2,000 horses gave them a 3-to-1 advantage over the cavalry's mounts, many of which were exhausted from days of marching. This effort, with ropes flying and hooves thundering, ensured the Sioux could sustain their cavalry assaults. The recapture of horses was not just practical but symbolic, a reclaiming of power in the face of invasion. Reno's surviving troops, now fewer than 130, scrambled up a steep hill, their blue coats tattered and faces grim. Red Horse described how the Sioux swiftly surrounded this position, cutting off any hope of reinforcing Custer. Warriors took positions in ravines and behind ridges, their rifles and bows trained on the hilltop. Utley argues that this containment was a masterstroke, isolating Reno's battered command and freeing the Sioux to focus on Custer. The hill, later called Reno Hill, became a prison for its defenders, who dug shallow trenches under relentless fire. This siege marked a turning point, showcasing the Sioux's ability to dictate the battle's tempo. With Reno's troops pinned on their hill, the Sioux warriors returned to their camp, their faces streaked with sweat and dust. Croaking, his war bonnet swaying, noted that this brief pause was shattered when Custer's force, some 210 men, opened fire from nearly a mile away. Their carbines flashed in the midday sun, signaling a new threat. Historian Nathaniel Philbrick, in The Last Stand, estimates that Custer's approach came around noon, catching the Sioux as they regrouped. The distant gunfire, echoing across the valley, stirred the camp once more. Warriors, still catching their breath, grabbed rifles and bows, ready to face this second wave of blue coats advancing toward their families. The Sioux encampment was a formidable force, stretching over 2.5 miles along the Little Bighorn. Crow King described its warriors as numerous as leaves, a vivid image of their strength. Historian Robert Utley, in the Indian Wars, calculates that the camp housed up to 7,000 people, including 1,500 to 2,000 warriors from bands like the Hunkpapa, Oglala, and Cheyenne. This massive coalition, united against U.S. encroachment, fielded a force far larger than Custer's 600-man regiment. As women and children huddled in ravines, the warriors prepared to defend a village that was not just a home but a symbol of their resistance. A sudden distraction disrupted the Sioux's focus. Red Horse recounted how a messenger galloped in, claiming that U.S. soldiers had captured women and children. This news spread like wildfire, prompting warriors to abandon their siege of Reno's Hill to rescue their kin. Later, the report proved false, but it revealed the Sioux' deep commitment to family. Historian Gregory Micknow in Lakota Noon notes that protecting non-combatants was a priority, with over 4,000 women and children in the camp. This brief diversion, with warriors racing across the valley, underscored their humanity, even as they faced a relentless enemy. The battlefield's terrain shaped the coming clash. Red Horse described a flat, open landscape, broken only by a small creek and scattered sagebrush. This lack of cover favored the Sioux' mounted tactics but left Custer's men exposed. Historian James Donovan, in A Terrible Glory, explains that the valley's openness allowed the Sioux to maneuver freely, unlike the confined spaces of earlier battles like Washita. As Custer's troops descended a gulch, their blue uniforms stark against the green grass, the Sioux prepared to exploit this terrain, their ponies ready to charge across the unprotected plain. Custer's plan was ambitious but doomed. Flying Hawk and Gull recalled how his 210 men aimed to strike the village's lower end, hoping to scatter its defenders. Instead, they were halted half a mile from the river in a gulch, now called Reno Creek. Gull insisted Custer never reached the water, a claim supported by historian Stephen Ambrose, who notes that Custer's advance stalled due to unexpected resistance. The Sioux scouts, ever vigilant, had tracked his movements, allowing warriors to intercept him. Custer's men, their horses tiring, faced a wall of Sioux fighters, their war cries rising like a storm. The Sioux closed in with lethal precision. Rain in the Face described how warriors enveloped Custer's troops on two sides, with the Little Bighorn's steep banks blocking a third. This three-sided trap left no escape. Philbrick estimates that 1,000 warriors engaged Custer, outnumbering his force 5-1. As Sioux riders circled, their lances and rifles raised, Custer's men dismounted, forming defensive lines on a low ridge. The river, glinting behind them, offered no refuge. This encirclement, executed with chilling efficiency, marked the beginning of Custer's downfall. No single chief commanded the Sioux, yet their attacks were synchronized. Crow King explained that the cry "Hi-Hi" signaled warriors to follow their leader's actions, a simple command that unified hundreds in battle. Historian Thomas Powers, in The Killing of Crazy Horse, praises this decentralized system, which allowed flexibility without chaos. As chiefs like Crow King and Gull rode among their men, their voices carrying over the din, the Sioux moved as one. This coordination, rooted in cultural cohesion, turned a disparate force into a disciplined machine, ready to crush Custer's isolated command. Sitting Bull, the Hunkpapa spiritual leader, played a strategic role. Rain in the Face noted that he initially directed tactics from the camp, his presence calming the chaos. Later, he joined the fight against Custer, riding with warriors to bolster their resolve. Utley described Sitting Bull as a unifying figure whose counsel shaped the Sioux' response. At 45, with graying hair and a steady gaze, he was no mere fighter but a symbol of resistance. His shift from strategist to warrior, as the battle intensified, inspired those around him, ensuring the Sioux maintained pressure on both Reno and Custer. Youthful courage defined the Sioux' ranks. Rain in the Face marveled at young warriors, some as young as 15, charging Custer's lines with only stone axes or war clubs. These boys, their faces painted with red stripes, rode fearlessly into gunfire. Migno estimates that a quarter of the Sioux fighters were under 20, their inexperience offset by raw bravery. Armed with weapons passed down from fathers or captured in prior raids, they disrupted Custer's formations, their reckless charges sowing panic. This blend of youth and tradition strengthened the Sioux' assault, proving that valor knew no age. Custer's troops unraveled under the onslaught. Iron Hawk watched as soldiers, their blue coats torn, abandoned their lines and ran on foot. Some fired wildly into the air, their discipline collapsing. Donovan notes that Custer's men, exhausted from a 30-mile march, were ill-prepared for the Sioux' ferocity. Panic spread as horses bolted, leaving soldiers stranded. The sight of these men, stumbling down slopes with carbines useless, was a stark contrast to their earlier confidence. The Sioux, sensing weakness, pressed harder, their war cries drowning out the soldiers' desperate shouts. Mechanical failure compounded Custer's woes. Gall observed that the soldiers' Springfield carbines jammed with empty cartridges, forcing them to rely on Colt revolvers. Historian John Gray in Centennial Campaign attributes this to the rifle's copper cartridges, which expanded in the heat of rapid firing. With only 6 shots per pistol, the soldiers' firepower dwindled. The Sioux, using a mix of bows, lances, and captured rifles, faced no such constraints. This technological edge, born of U.S. equipment flaws, tilted the battle further, leaving Custer's men vulnerable in the open. The Sioux struck at Custer's mobility. Gall described how warriors targeted the soldiers, holding horses, killing them with precise shots. Others waved blankets and shouted, spooking the cavalry's mounts into a stampede. Philbrick estimates that Custer lost half his 200 horses in minutes, stranding his men. Without mounts, retreat became impossible. The Sioux' tactic, rooted in their mastery of horsemanship, was devastatingly effective. As panicked horses galloped toward the horizon, Custer's troops huddled on the ridge, their fate sealed by the loss of their lifeline. A few soldiers made desperate bids for freedom. Rain in the Face saw several mount horses and flee toward Reno's hill, their faces pale with fear. Sioux warriors pursued, their ponies swift and sure. He likened them to blackbirds chasing an eagle, a vivid image of relentless pursuit. Michno reports that none of these fugitives survived, cut down by arrows or lances. This ruthless efficiency ensured Custer's force remained isolated, unable to link with Reno. The Sioux' ability to chase down stragglers highlighted their dominance, turning escape attempts into death sentences. The companies under Captains Keogh and Calhoun fought with grim resolve. Gall recounted how these 80 men dismounted, forming tight ranks as infantry. They retreated step by step up the ridge, firing until their ammunition ran low. Utley notes that Keogh's company, found later in a tight cluster of 38 bodies, made a final stand, their courage undeniable. Calhoun's men, similarly steadfast, fell in their positions. Despite their bravery, the Sioux' overwhelming numbers prevailed. This dogged resistance, though futile, earned the respect of warriors like Gall, who acknowledged their refusal to surrender. The Sioux paid a heavy price for victory. Red Horse reported 36 warriors killed and 160 wounded, a toll that touched every band in the camp. Crow King later spoke of losing 2 brothers. A personal tragedy echoed across the village. Historian D. Brown, in Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, estimates that the Sioux' losses, while lower than the cavalry's, strained their community, with wounded warriors requiring care amid ongoing threats. These casualties, born in defense of their people, underscored the battle's cost, a somber counterpoint to the triumph soon to come. The annihilation of Custer's command was swift and merciless. Flying Hawk and Crow King recounted how, in less than an hour, all 210 men under Custer's direct command lay dead, their bodies scattered across the ridge. The speed of this defeat stunned even the Sioux, who had fought with relentless fury. Historian Nathaniel Philbrick, in The Last Stand, estimates that the final assault on Custer's position began around 1 p.m. and ended before 2 p.m., a mere fraction of the battle's duration. As dust settled over the bloodied grass, the Sioux stood victorious, their war cries fading into an eerie silence, a testament to their overwhelming power and resolve. Amid the chaos, Custer himself remained a ghost. Rain in the face, his stone axe still gripped tightly, later admitted that no warrior recognized the famed long hair during the fight. Custer had cut his hair short before the campaign, abandoning his trademark locks. This detail, noted by historian Robert Utley in the Indian Wars, caused confusion as warriors searched for a leader they expected to stand out. The anonymity of Custer's death, shrouded in the battle's fog, added a layer of mystery to the Sioux' triumph, as the man who symbolized U.S. ambition became just another fallen soldier. In the battle's aftermath, the Sioux methodically collected their spoils. Flying Hawk described warriors dismounting to gather 700 firearms, including Springfield carbines and Colt revolvers, along with rings, money, and watches from the dead. Some donned the soldiers' blue coats, a grim trophy of victory. Redhorse noted that others took clothing from non-military whites among the fallen, possibly interpreters or scouts. Historian James Donovan, in A Terrible Glory, estimates that these captured weapons significantly bolstered the Sioux' arsenal, equipping them for future conflicts. This systematic looting, conducted under the fading sun, marked both practicality and the assertion of dominance. A bizarre incident punctuated the grim scene. Iron Hawk witnessed two elderly women, their hands steady despite their age, stripping a wounded soldier who feigned death. As they began to mutilate him, the man leapt up, fighting desperately before another woman stabbed him dead. This macabre episode, recorded by historian Gregory Micknow in Lakota Noon, reveals the raw intensity of the battle's aftermath. The women's actions, driven by anger over the attack on their kin, reflect the personal stakes of the conflict, where even the elderly joined in retribution against an enemy who had targeted their families. With Custer's force eradicated, the Sioux turned their attention back to Reno's beleaguered troops. Crow King described how warriors resumed their siege of the hill, firing until sunset bathed the valley in orange light. Through the night, they maintained a vigilant watch, ensuring Reno's 130 survivors could not escape. Historian Stephen Ambrose, in Crazy Horse and Custer, notes that this relentless pressure prevented Reno from aiding Custer, a tactical success that sealed the 7th Cavalry's fate. The Sioux' ability to sustain this siege, while mourning their own losses, underscored their discipline and determination. The arrival of U.S. infantry reinforcements changed the battle's course. Redhorse recounted how a Sioux scout spotted these fresh troops, likely General Terry's column of over 400 men, approaching from the north. Fearing their numbers, the Sioux withdrew, sparing Reno's remaining force. Historian Thomas Powers, in The Killing of Crazy Horse, argues that this retreat was strategic, as the Sioux avoided a potentially costly engagement with rested infantry. The decision, made swiftly as dust clouds heralded the newcomers, preserved their victory while acknowledging the limits of their resources. The Sioux' harassment of Reno's men continued until the end. Ironhawk described hiding in riverbank bushes, watching as soldiers, desperate for water, crept down with buckets. Unarmed and vulnerable, they were easy targets. Sioux boys, some as young as 12, hurled mud and rushed them, killing several in the shallows. Philbrick estimates that Reno lost another 10 men to such skirmishes, further weakening his command. This brutal tactic, targeting the soldiers' basic needs, revealed the Sioux' unrelenting resolve to punish those who had invaded their land. As night fell, the battlefield grew quiet. Ironhawk, his stomach growling after a day without food, joined other warriors returning to camp for dinner. Women prepared meals, their fires glowing in the darkness, while some warriors stayed to guard Reno's hill. Historian D. Brown, in Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, notes that this return to domestic routines, even amid war, reflected the Sioux' confidence in their control. The casual act of eating, juxtaposed with the day's carnage, highlighted a community resilient enough to find normalcy in crisis. The search for Custer's body proved futile, Rain in the Face recalled how chiefs ordered warriors to find long hair among the dead, expecting a figure with flowing hair. Custer's short crop defied their image, leaving his fate uncertain. Utley confirms that Custer's body, found with 2 bullet wounds, was identified only later by U.S. troops. This failure to locate their famed foe added an ironic twist to the Sioux' victory, as the man who loomed large in their fears vanished into the anonymity of the fallen. Post-battle tasks were divided by tradition. Rain in the Face described young men chasing stray horses across the prairie, their laughter mingling with the clatter of hooves. Meanwhile, women and elders looted bodies, collecting blankets, boots, and ammunition. Michno estimates that the Sioux gathered over 1,000 items, from canteens to saddles, vital for their nomadic life. This organized division, with each group fulfilling its role, reflected a community that balanced celebration with practicality, ensuring their survival in the face of future threats. A prized trophy emerged from the spoils. Flying Hawk noted a sorrel horse with white stockings, believed to be Custer's mount captured during the battle. Relatives later confirmed seeing Custer ride this horse en route to the Little Bighorn. Historian John Gray, in Centennial Campaign, suggests that such a capture was a significant honor, symbolizing the defeat of a great enemy. The horse, led proudly through the camp, became a living emblem of the Sioux' triumph, its presence a reminder of their prowess. The Sioux' victory hinged on a critical error. Red Horse and Crow King emphasized that the 7th Cavalry's division into separate commands allowed the Sioux to defeat each in turn. Had Reno and Custer fought together, the outcome might have differed. Donovan argues that this fragmentation, driven by Custer's overconfidence, was the battle's decisive factor. The Sioux' ability to exploit this mistake, focusing their 1,500 warriors on isolated units, showcased a tactical acumen that belied U.S. claims of savage warfare. A surprising act of mercy followed the carnage. Crow King recounted how an Hunkpapa chief, joined by Sitting Bull, called for a ceasefire against Reno's survivors, declaring they had been punished enough. This decision, noted by powers, reflected a moral complexity rarely acknowledged in contemporary accounts. Sitting Bull, his voice calm amid the chaos, argued that the soldiers were merely following orders. This restraint, sparing men who had killed Sioux kin, challenged stereotypes of unrelenting vengeance, revealing a leadership guided by humanity. Crow King's reflections carried a haunting foresight. He admired Custer's courage, noting how his men fought to the last. Yet, he foresaw that continued resistance against the U.S. would doom native peoples. Historian Evan Connell, in Son of the Morning Star, interprets this as a recognition of the overwhelming resources of the U.S. military. Crow King's words, spoken as he surveyed the battlefield, blended pride in victory with a somber awareness of the future, a poignant acknowledgement of the Sioux' precarious path. Rain in the Face's story was one of devotion and loss. He fought for his people, his rifle and axe wielded in defense of a way of life. Yet, his spirit broke when he later surrendered to U.S. authorities, his weapons laid down before the Great Father. Brown describes this as a profound psychological wound, shared by many Sioux forced onto reservations. Rain in the Face's testimony, raw with emotion, captures the battle's deeper meaning, a desperate stand for homeland, followed by the slow erosion of freedom. His words linger, a testament to a people's resilience and heartbreak. Rain in the Face's poignant reflection, his spirit broken by surrender, echoes the bittersweet triumph of the Sioux at Little Bighorn. Their victory, forged through tactical brilliance and unyielding courage, shattered the 7th Cavalry in a mere hour, claiming over 260 lives and cementing the 25th of June, 1876, as a defining moment. Yet, as Crow King foresaw, This triumph marked not a turning point, but the dawn of intensified U.S. retaliation. Historian D. Brown notes that within a year, the Sioux faced relentless campaigns, their way of life eroded by reservations and broken treaties. The voices of Crow King, Red Horse, Gull, and others reveal a people who fought not as savages but as defenders of their homeland. Their 36 dead and 160 wounded a testament to their sacrifice. This battle, etched in the dust of Greasy Grass, stands as a monument to their resilience, urging us to honor their story with reverence and humility.